Good afternoon, everybody. I am Interoperability. This is Monday Live, something that we do every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, trying to figure out the future of smarter buildings, to be more precise. Panelist profiles listed on Monday Live. We are a little light today. There's 6 of us here. I'm going to invite people from the audience to come and join us and talk about some questions that we're going to ask ourselves. So hopefully we'll get some interesting participation from you guys. Love to hear from you.
Is that me or is that Anto?
Yeah. I think that's Anto. He froze on us.
He froze on us. That's right.
Yeah, I lost him.
I lost him too.
So are we useless without Anto?
Yes, apparently so. We are dead in the water. There's no rudder.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we can just say his messages as he said there.
Well, somebody could go to Monday Live here and kind of take over because I think we can still share screen and so forth.
Oh, that's true.
Oh, we can? If we can, yeah. I can flip it.
Yeah, why don't you bring yours up, Ken?
Oh, he's back. No, he's
okay.
not back.
No, we lost him altogether.
No, he says Anno's the host.
Oh, he's made me the host. Hang on, you want to? Let's share your screen.
You want me to share my screen?
You should be able to, Ken.
Okay, let me see. Oh, he's back.
Oh, I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't know what happened there.
China.
Okay,
Gotcha.
you're going to reboot and start over again?
I think I have rebooted.
No, I mean you. I don't mean your computer.
Oh.
An Anto reboot.
I have rebooted myself. Yeah, we're going to ask this one question, this question of all of us, and hopefully some of you can also chime in. So what change do we anticipate that's actually going to make a big difference here to BAS? So we'll get to that. Before that, Ken, what's going on in Kenland?
Kenland, okay. I hadn't heard it that way. That's a good one. Automated buildings, women creating amazing opportunities. Our March issue is online right now. We got reference to that published in Connected Contractor in the celebration of International Women's Day. Good response there. It's interesting that when we just change the message a little, we always get a whole bunch of new people, and it makes a lot of our efforts visible to a lot of folks in the industry. I think that's a good thing. Our April issue we've started on, it's a radical reinvention, reconfiguration, and forced evolution. It's been pointed out those words might be kind of strong, but I'm trying to get you guys to react. So it's kind of maybe a slap in the face, but I think it's something we all have to deal with, that there is radical change going on, reinvention, in the metaverse, whatever that is out there. There's just a lot of changes, and how we portray that, I think it's going to be all about communication. And if we can have all of the opinions of both sides, we're starting to see a lot of new players coming into the industry. We have to see how they are portraying their messages and how they fit. I think some of the preliminary work we've done with the stack is quite useful to basically portray them and try and understand better what they are in fact offering. The thing that I would like to point out is automated buildings was started at the .com days in 1999, and there was a lot of talk and a lot of .bomb stuff going on, and a lot of naysaying. But there's no doubt that the .com revolution changed our industry, and there's no doubt that what the metaverse is, it's going to change our industry. So we need to understand better and just keep talking. So we're going to build on Monday Live's theme, which is the reconfiguration portion of that title. Our newest sponsor is Building IoT, and they're got an interview for us for our April issue on the ontology alignment project they've been working with, an open source data taxonomy for relationship to standardized variations and taggings and naming models in the built environment to support real world deadlines of projects. So interesting along the lines of what we've been talking about. And from our news page, I thought this was interesting. The future of work is flexible. Google will transition to a hybrid work week by April 4th. So that's coming up pretty quick. And the other one that caught my attention, which is on our news page and a few other items, the fractional marketing officer. We're all having trouble getting people, but we may be more successful at getting a piece of a person. And the advantage of getting a piece of a person is sometimes you can get somebody with the experience you need and the connections. So that's kind of a different kind of an approach. Okay, give it back to you, and I'm real pleased to answer your questions when it comes time.
Hey, Ken, just quickly on that future flexible Google's thing. So I saw Google's and Apple's, they have a really interesting way of the hybrid solution in that Apple is driving this one, in that the reason to come to the office is really only to have meetings where you need to be having meetings. In other words, don't come to the office for the sake of coming to the office. So they're planning and scheduling their meeting times around the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday type days, right? And so now they're quote unquote, there's a reason to come to the office because there's a meeting. You could debate whether the meeting's good, bad, or ugly. But it's kind of an interesting take of, rather than just sprinkling meetings randomly through the week with all your people, you actually concentrate them, when they are in the office, and then let them work when they're not, that type of deal. So I thought it was an interesting take from Apple to do that.
I think another thing is the whole idea of the middle manager is disappearing, because basically his job was to organize meetings. He didn't give a crap what the meeting was about. His success was organizing meetings, and the people don't want that anymore. So if we do have to meet, let's make it real.
Right.
It's interesting to me because we've gone through the 2 years of COVID, asking the question, what's going to happen after COVID? And I think we're pretty much after COVID now. So the new stable state is going to sort of evolve in the next few weeks and months, I think. So it'll be really interesting to see how that's all going to land.
I mean, come on, can you imagine organizations saying to their workforce, let's get back to 2 years ago? People are going to honestly and realistically go, wait, I'm actually more productive. I burn less fuel, I'm happier. Everything's going in the right direction. Excuse me? It would be a sort of a backward looking organization who wants everything to go back to even 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I talk to, friends that are in other industries outside of ours, insurance, teaching, things like that. And, one thing it's pervasive throughout, I think, almost every industry, that people are actually choosing to leave an industry where they've been for several years because they don't want to have to go back to the office. And for a lot of those reasons, they found that they're far more productive, and they don't have to get in a car, they don't have to waste fuel, especially in the time right now. And a lot of my family's out in Southern California. So what might be a mile down the street, that could take you an hour to get there. So there's a lot of things, and it's just people don't want to go back to 2 years ago. And almost everybody here on this call has worked remotely for a number of years. I mean, I have worked remotely for over a decade. It's definitely not for everyone, but I think a lot of companies struggle with, well, it's not the same as being in the office. You don't have that collaboration. You don't have this, you don't have that. And if you learned how to use the technology, I think that you'll find that that's going to be minimal impact. But that's just for me doing this for 10 plus years. So
I have to say my wife is ready for me to go back.
For sure. Okay, well, we've always worked remotely. This has been my corner office here for 30 years, even before automated buildings. So I work remotely. But the other thing that I see that is shifting this is the lack of people. And now we have the ability to actually own a portion of a person, a very valuable person that we couldn't probably even afford. Let's say the guy's worth $500,000. He's a mover shaker in our industry, and he can really make things happen. If we can buy or somehow negotiate a portion of his time, or her time, I should say, we can actually achieve that. And in fact, that person might be more effective sharing their network and sharing their knowledge than any other solution, where we would actually buy a person for $250,000 and try and get them brought into shape. So it's an interesting concept. The idea of just taking a piece of a person. And the thing is some of the powerful connections that they come with, and again, the cross-pollination that will cause in the industry is just totally amazing.
So, Ken, it's an interesting concept, and it's not a new concept, but what's happening is all these market forces are coming together so that smart labor, new labor paradigms are coming around. And I would say the same thing with automation. We've got this economy, this North American block of $26 trillion. We don't have the people for it. So you've got to be creative with your labor. You've got to start engaging the automation that's out there to do more with less. There's just no way around it anymore.
Okay, let's move on. So the Division 2525 collaboration that we kicked off 2 weeks ago is moving along quite nicely. We had another call last week. We're starting to draft these 3 documents. We've decided there's basically going to be 3 types of documents: a vision document, which is sort of a 2-page kind of thing that would be consumable by building owners and other sort of non-technical individuals, and then a some kind of requirements document, which will be sort of multi-page kind of thing that actually describes how to require interoperable systems in buildings, and then the actual template for the specs themselves. So we're sort of working through that order, and there's a draft of the first document being written that will be discussed tomorrow. If you are open to joining this group, please ping me on chat, or otherwise on other means, ping me or ping any of us, and we'll get you involved in that. Any other thoughts from the group on any other matters, subjects?
Just a general observation I've noticed in the last couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. The industry does seem to be picking up significantly. There seems to be a lot more heat. I know we as a group are getting a lot more busy, and hence the lesser number of people on the call and stuff. But I do sense a lot, and both here and in our APAC marketplace as well. They're starting to open up now, and I'm getting a lot of inquiries.
It's an interesting transition point. So I live in Atlanta, where nobody wears a mask, and I'm in LA for a couple of weeks, and you're in a transition of it's a weird spot in LA. So that's the transition I'm experiencing.
LA is even more conservative that way than the state of California is. I was there a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about dropping the mask mandate as a California state thing, but LA County was going to hang on to it for a while. I don't know if it worked out that way or not. I think we have people that are on that are from LA, maybe.
Alex Diaz is just mentioning that on the chat. He's in Orange County.
Yeah.
Wondering if anyone has seen any effects of the war, higher energy prices, or anything else on the business yet in APAC or anywhere else?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think I saw $7.50 gas price somewhere here in LA, Jim, which is unusual. In Atlanta, I saw it in the high 4s, so gas prices are definitely going up.
That's going to
we're-
translate into costs and service costs.
Well, and also to the average Joe, including people that work in energy in our industry, that's what they notice first. They'll notice price at the pump, and then they'll start looking at what their natural gas prices are and see that. I'm just curious to see if anyone's seen any effect in the business yet. For people talking about it.
We have a little bit, and I don't know, Ken, maybe you can comment on this, but we do a little business in the oil sands. And when the price gets up this high, they spin up production like crazy. Everything they can open and run, they run. And when it drops, I can't remember the price, when it's whatever it is, $100 a barrel or whatever, drops below that, they start shuttering things. So it's probably a much lower than 100. You know what I mean?
And I'll tell you, Jim, we've absolutely seen an uptick in two areas. First, the water and wastewater SCADA people are being mandated that they've got to lock their systems down based on the DHS is just putting out like dictates of, you've got it, like, here's what we think is coming down the pike. So we're getting calls on that. And we're also getting calls from both countries, Canada and the US, about increase in pipeline flow and SCADA and security on that. That's all happening within the past 2 to 3 weeks.
Interesting.
Yep.
One thing I saw that was interesting was there's also the potential shortage of all the bits and pieces we need to build electric cars, the battery basic elements and stuff, and the fact that a lot of that is part of the petroleum production process, the plastics and stuff that are encasing all of this stuff. And what they're seeing is that may get more complicated as there's a big trend to electric vehicles, but if the electric vehicles actually production may almost get stopped because we can't get the bits and pieces to build them. So that was an interesting one. Back to Tracy's comment too, is the Alberta tar sands, they have bags of oil. It's hard to get out, and their cost just doesn't compare to pumping it out of the ground. So when Venezuela or Arabia, the Mid East is pumping it out of the ground, that's the cheapest source. And I guess Russia's probably still doing a bit of that as well. So as soon as it gets up, it just is a whole new ballpark. And they basically have jumped up. And I think they almost think they can supply the shortage. The trouble is they built the silly pipelines to China rather than building them to Ottawa, because Ottawa wanted to buy cheap oil. But don't get me started. Too late.
All right, so let's move on then. That's great conversation. So reconfiguring the BAS industry, that's the theme for the month. So the question really is for this group, and we'll be talking about this. And again, I really want to pose this question to anybody in the audience and who wants to chime in, and we'll bring you in on the panel. What is the single change that would make the biggest difference to improve our industry, the BAS industry? And why, and what kind of impact we're talking about? And if you think it's a big change, how are you preparing? And is this a good thing or a bad thing from a optimism versus?
I could tee Jim up a little bit. Procurement practices.
Thank you.
I'll let
Jim, you want to start?
Tracy, why don't you start?
Well, we all know that there are a lot of problems with the procurement practices in our industry, right? It's low cost, it's not value procurement. It's, we come sometimes at the end of the chain in terms of purchasing. That's a problem. I joke sometimes the only industry worse when it comes to buildings is landscaping, right? Landscaping is the very last thing that is on the list and always subject to value engineering. And then the other problem is just in general, everywhere else in the world is moving to sort of a monthly OpEx model, but our industry is still primarily purchasing CapEx equipment that goes in the building and expected to last 15 or 20 years, which also stifles innovation and modernization of all of this stuff. So Just a general start. I'll let you expound, Jim.
This is, that Tracy has pointed that out because I've been on my soapbox for the last several years about this, or last several decades. But, fundamentally, we're going to have to change as a society how we decide to make investments in buildings and in energy efficiency and cybersecurity, all of these things. Because as Tracy has rightly pointed out, what you really have is a migration in society at large from products to services. And largely, many of these elements of the services, the value that we can bring to the buildings in terms of analytics, or the new values that people need to optimize and run these assets better, are operating items. And if we persist in this world of low cost first bid, and in fact, no money besides that in the life cycle of a building, we're not going to see any innovation, and we're not going to see any progress in any of these areas. So the fundamental question is how do you change that discussion? And unfortunately, in our industry, we're not the arbiters of who makes those rules, but we need to basically initiate dialogue. And through the C4SB group and Monday Live group, we've been coordinating to try to have some conversations in Washington to use the federal government, state and local governments to prime that initiative, as well as beginning to talk to other professional associations in accounting and business, where these rules are actually made, to really educate them on what these problems are. I'll stop there.
So the
think
last
that fits.
part,
Sorry.
just the last part of this complex question is, how are you preparing and your level of optimism that something's going to happen in any time that makes a difference to?
There is one thing that I'm starting to notice just a little bit when it comes to the procurement model. And that is, it's pretty typical for in capital acquisition models to go get multiple bids. And then that's where the whole low cost comes in, right? Even if it's a good procurement department who can look beyond just the bottom line number, there is a requirement to get multiple bids. Just a couple of years ago, you could not go out and find more than one company or two companies maybe that could quote you on any kind of an OpEx model, a recurring monthly revenue service, as opposed to CapEx. And now you're starting to see examples of that more and more. And there are more and more companies that are offering various kinds of services within our industry, where somebody who said, well, I can't do that because I need multiple bids. Well, now you can go get multiple bids on a recurring revenue type service. And you couldn't do that very much at all.
What's interesting is you have to ask some fundamental questions. So if we were to look at government or military or big business, there's this rule that basically that multiple bids are the elixir to all problems. And you have to ask fundamentally, what were multiple bids designed to do? They were designed to create competition to get the price down. They were designed to make sure that you weren't giving all the business to your brother-in-law, to give some transparency to that process. But there are costs associated with that. And I think everyone on this call, including the audience, has probably had to fight with open bidding processes where huge amounts of money are spent on the bid process, potentially more than is spent on the job, with many people chasing that. One has to ask, is that efficient? And maybe did we get more done in a time when there was less bureaucracy and the brother-in-law got some of the work? So I think there's a balance, and constantly defaulting to low first bid. You don't hire your criminal lawyer on low first bid. You don't hire your brain surgeon on first cost. These are things that are professional services. And a lot of what we're offering in smarter buildings, intelligent buildings, are professional services offerings that do not lead themselves well to low bid. There's one category in the federal acquisition regulations which allows for non-competitive bidding in the federal government. And there's that carve out is specifically for architecture, because it was thought that low bid on something that's artistic wasn't something that was going to work. But I would propose that maybe low bidding doesn't always arrive at the right answer. It's an excellent tool for commodity purposes or purchasing commodity items, but for professional services, maybe there are also transparent and equitable ways or different business models that that are not low first bid.
I would say that the equivalent in our industry is innovation to artistic value, right? If people recognize the innovation and how important that part of it is, they might raise that to a higher value, see the world a little bit differently, understand that you can't buy it once and it's still going to be state of the art 15 or 20 years from now.
All these, the big consulting companies are going around teaching everyone and selling these competitive bidding ideas, but they abhor that idea themselves. You know, if you went to the top consulting companies, they almost never participate in low bid structures
Right.
on their own hiring.
So
One-
level of optimism. Is this just, it's just going to take time?
It's going to take time. If the way I have always seen this is look at what the rest of the world is doing, consumer land, let's say, and you know, we have a tendency to follow that just much further behind. So once everybody is comfortable with everything else in their life being that way, then there's a chance that they'll look at it as the way to do things in our business, I think.
My level of optimism is high because I think we're just going to hit the wall on a number of these items, where especially cybersecurity, where when things start going wrong, people are going to realize that this is a process, not a product, not a capital item, but an ongoing process. And there'll be a few wedge issues that start to open it up, and then some more rational thinking will prevail after that. But I'm optimistic that we're at the start of a long fight, but that at least we're going to be talking about the right things soon.
Jim and Tracy, I have to completely agree with you. I'm optimistic for all the reasons you said, and I see it every day. People cracking open, going, oh yeah, well, let's do it that way. I don't see it yet where you're talking about the big OEMs and all this, but boy, I'm seeing it in areas that would surprise all of you. So I stand with you, highly optimistic. We've talked about crossing the chasm. That chasm is right now, man.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to make a point though, is where I see all this coming together, and I totally agree with what you guys are saying, is it's all about communication. And somehow we haven't got our messages up high enough in the value chain, and we need to do a better job of that. We're doing with Monday Live, we're pulling together a lot of the thought, but again, we need a better publication. We need a better message to the industry, and we're trying to fix our broken model here, and as we're part of this radical reinvention, reconfiguration as well. We need to dust us off, but we need to dust off our connections to other industry and the mediums that do that. Our message needs to go to folks like ASHRAE and to the consultants and the architects. And we need to just communicate better, because we've done an awful job of that in the past. And the trouble is, why we have done such a poor job is we've been so fragmented. And we now seem to be kind of pulling together under cybersecurity, under analytics, under some of these things. And you're starting to say the same story. We do it this way, this one a little better, but conceptually analytics is analytics, cybersecurity is cybersecurity. And we've got topics, and now with the stack, we can kind of break out some of the intricate pieces of that. So I think that's important, that we get our messaging together and move it to the next level. Automated buildings is part of helping you pull this together, but it needs to go to the next level. I think we need to start, getting our stuff in the New York Times, and it's got to move up to the next level of consciousness. I'm optimistic that that'll happen.
Yeah, cool.
One of the other things, and it's a little bit on what Bill said, is, and I'm gonna go, of course, I agree with everybody on here, but I'm gonna deviate a little bit and say that it's kind of like someone once said, well, you know, you never got fired by specking IBM, you know, or Microsoft or something. So I'm going to say when we right now, you know, we still have the big four, the big five, whatever they are, remain nameless. But when we start seeing some of these companies that are the smaller companies, the upstarts, when we start seeing some growth and expansion and market share to be gained by them, you know, I think that will change the tide, because, you know, even today, when you get into some of the quoting or the design or the spec or whatever it is, I mean, it still kind of goes here because someone's too afraid to stick their neck out on a limb and try something else. You know, even though in other industries all over the world, we see it in things like, you know, in other forms of technology, such as Uber or Amazon or whatever, you see it, but you don't see that here. It's still, to me, a very big goal, divide between the big companies that have been here for 100+ years and the upstart companies. And to me, there's absolutely not really anything in between. And so when we start getting that in between company, and whether that's from all of these smaller companies acquiring or merging or whatever they need to do, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that these companies need to start thinking about that, because I think we've all said, well, we're very disenfranchised, and we still are. We all talk. We're all here to some degree on this call, and the listeners, we're all here either some type of a competitor in one way or the other. And we all are really good about going out and having dinner together and talking together. But let's find a way to do business together as well.
You know,
I think
Yeah,
Greg has a good point. I'm sorry. He asked why we can't get more visibility in the climate change conversation. And that's something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And it has to do with where we are as an industry in the food chain, where people see us. And I think that by getting some of these conversations going, by getting what we're doing more in alignment with ESG and these other programs, I think you have to pick the program du jour, and ESG is the high-level board program, and we've got to get our teeth into that kind of thing. So that's my view on that.
Really, this is interesting, Greg and Jim. We're hearing from other industries, the midstream industry, the pipelines, where they've got to move in certain directions, select certain products to get their ESG ratings up to a point where they can win contracts and stuff. So I actually heard this for the first time just a few weeks ago, where just a regular grunt controls guy was saying, yeah, we got to do this because the ESG. I mean, normally this is a board level conversation. And we heard this at the integration level. We're like, whoa, that's a new thing.
We have to help make that connection.
Yeah.
You know, with C4SB and other groups, we are going to try to do that. But we need, you know, basically broad support of our own groups and our own industry to continue to help us make those connections as we go along. And that's critical, because we'll end up with, you know, greenwashing otherwise. And that is the default behavior here. And we've seen that over and over again over the years, that people have, you know, even when we've tried, not taken us seriously and defaulted to greenwashing and other softer substances. So,
well, you couple that with the stuff that I've been tracking over the last few months and sort of reporting on the Monday Night Live, with the number of dollars of investment in new initiatives and stuff. It's really high, right? If you go back through some of the charts, that last year, this year, there's a lot of VC money, investment money going into a lot of these initiatives on ESGs and stuff that are doing, and they're getting the attention because for those reasons, right? Because people are sensitive to everything we just talked about. So a lot of that's going to spill down into our world as well. I think the challenge is, back to the whole point about the smarter stack, is how do we, you got to message it, but you got to message it in a way that still people understand, right? What's it doing for you? What is this company really doing in ESG when they say ESG? What's the space they're trying to solve? So there's still some language to be done. But having said that, I see that all as positive, right? I do see a positive that all this money being plowed into it, these new initiatives, is getting the focus on, to Gina's point, the startups plus the startup's going to move into the middle area. You know, they're doing a lot of good work at getting the message out there, and I think it's to me, it's definitely a path to follow. You know, for getting the message out, as opposed to you need more analytics.
Yeah.
You know, we have maybe the best example, positive example of our industry evolving right on this screen. 6 out of 7 of us, our primary focus right now is software, not hardware. If we were having this conversation 5-10 years ago, you know, I've had hardware conversations with some of you for years and years and years. It's always about the hardware. And that's the part that's getting commoditized, and where the value injection in innovation is coming is all on the software side. So the fact that virtually all of us on this screen are now focused on software stuff tells you a whole lot about what's going on, right? The industry
Who's the
is
hardware
evolving.
guy here?
What's that?
Who's the hardware person here?
Well, Anno and I were always hardware, and Jim and I were always hardware, and Gina used to be hardware all the time.
Yeah, that's interesting.
When I first met you, it was all about the box, the hardware part of it, you know, even before I even understood there was software behind the whole thing. So
it's so interesting. It's a great point.
yeah.
Okay. Let's move on. And Anno, I think you had a single thing that you would like to see.
Yeah, and it's just building on what I just said, right? It's all about the language. The challenge that I'm still having out there is having a common language that we talk about, not on the technology or the protocols or any of that sort of stuff, but the language that we're trying to talk about with what we're trying to do with Smarter Stack, helping to better communicate the solutions and the type of technologies that are coming out, that are there today, help position it in, you know, when we talk about ESG as that's an outcome, or, you know, and how does that flow down? I still see, you know, and I know this is take time, but I still see the language being the big thing. We were talking just before we got online, you know, I'd love to see the universal translator, right? The Star Trek universal translator, where I can hear somebody's marketing message and go, okay, that translates like this to the stack. Right now, I understand where they are. And I think if someone can come up with that tool, that would help owners and property managers a lot more. Like, okay, I hear your marketing message, run it through the translator. Okay, I get it. Here's where you fit. Type of
That's
deal.
so it's interesting. Yeah.
We need that for protocols too, of course.
Yeah.
Well, there are some people who would say that they've had that for a while, Tracy.
Yeah.
I could agree or disagree with that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. But same sort of thing, right? In a lot of ways, maybe there needs to be the Jace of the marketing messaging. They can take what people are saying and convert it to what does it actually mean, type of lingo. It's just in the last week or so, I've sat in several presentations where I looked at before the presentation, I looked at their website and I looked at their marketing message and I looked at their brochure, and it all seemed like, well, it sounded like what everyone here on the screen is doing today. And then when I go sit in the presentation, I go, oh, okay, I get it. You're really only doing these parts here, doing it well. And, you know, you're doing a good job for that, but this is what you're solving. And so, but it's still.
Does that require a little bit of, let's say, bravery for somebody to say, I can only do this bit?
That's true. Yes.
Right, because the expectation is that you're going to solve all my problems, and doing just one bit doesn't solve everybody's all of their problems. And
Now,
I'm wondering whether that
basic business strategy would say focus on a niche and a specific, you know, be the best at your part of the market, right? Well, however you define that to be, you got to be number one kind of thing.
Yeah, except that in this crazy world of everybody grabbing for cash from VC and everything else, they have to pretend they're everything, or they're very close to being everything. So the whole market gets confused. I don't know what half of these companies do. They all do everything, they say.
Right. And that's the problem I'm having too, you know.
Because it involves you making a sacrifice that you're not doing the rest, and that's
Something.
really hard. Yeah.
Which is also a challenge when you are competing against the big five, because technically the big five, they do everything, right? So, you know, if your message is, you know, I'm very focused here and I do this thing, and the customer goes, well, you know, how does that compare against X of the big five? Well, they do everything. I can't compare. You know, that's not a fair comparison.
So the smarter stack becomes the way to counter that
Yeah,
argument.
exactly. Right. And to bring it home. Right.
Is it
Which
only
we-
me, or is everybody here afraid to mention anything but the big five? You guys are all wimps, man.
I think it's just a shorthand. It's not
Okay.
that we're afraid. And people.
Yeah,
we're putting it in the
otherwise we have
comments.
to single one out, right? We
Yeah,
don't
that's
want
true.
to-
I
Or
get it.
list them all, right?
Yeah,
Right.
which is just a mouthful.
Yeah, exactly.
So Gina, Bill, Ken, Tracy, you've kind of gave the same answer as Jim. Gina, Bill, Ken, what is your one big things?
I'll just say, for me, my one big thing always revolves around here, where it's our one big thing is, and I really, really got what everyone said. Gina, so Ken, I love that you're recognizing a confluence of things that happen. Gina, I love this idea of finding actually a middle market player instead of having such a binary world of all these guys on the left, they're startup, it's all vaporware, and then these guys over here that are BMS, starting to see that middle start to grow. For me, if my one big thing is if we can stop saying we've always done it that way. It's, to me, it's mental and language and messaging, and just in the 2 years we've been doing the Stinking Monday Live, I'm seeing a confluence, or at least a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for, when things are starting to shore up a little, like language is starting to get a little bit more, not standardized, but less ineffable. I don't know what the word is, but I'm starting to see like a big smoke is starting to like get a form. It's still nebulous, but I'm starting to actually see it from my outside perspective, a form that's starting to happen where a guy like me can go, oh yeah, that's what this industry does. So that I'm starting to see that, and I still all see way too much of we've always done it that way, and all that, and that's just the thing that like just irks me as a neophyte.
I thought for sure you were going to say cybersecurity, Bill. Just to set you up a
That
little
would be
bit.
too obvious.
Yeah, well, but you asked earlier, you know, Ukraine and the war and everything that's going on, but cybersecurity issues is a big part of that. And just to build on that a little bit, you know, Ukraine is sort of a center for a lot of software development and innovation. One of my
Yep.
customers has a team based there, and now their status is unsure
Yeah.
what's going on. And so, and part of the issue with cybersecurity is it's really easy to, it just gets out there, right? Depending on the type of thing that's getting spread. If it's a direct point-to-point attack, that's different. But if it's a general release of a virus kind of a thing, you know, that's indiscriminate. And there's been lots of reports already in the US of added traffic and excessive attacks and so forth.
Sure.
Bill, I'm sure you can
Sure.
comment on that a lot more than I can, but
Sure, the DDoS stuff. I mean, look at the guys that are on this call. Look at the attendees list. There's a bunch of cybersecurity experts out there. So yeah, without being too obvious, that's a thing. I just am heartened to see people start to accept and adopt new technology. I mean, somebody mentioned metaverse an hour ago. I mean, are you kidding me? Can we not
Gina,
talk about it? But
Gina,
at
what's
least-
what's your question on metaverse? Let's talk about metaverse for a minute.
Okay, well, can I give my one thing and then bring into
Yeah, yeah.
metaverse? Because I
Go,
want,
go.
okay, so my one big thing is that, you know, my ask would be that, and I'm gonna go, because everybody here has really great opinions on that, but I'm gonna go a little bit different, and I'm gonna say, one is that innovation doesn't need to come from the outside. And what I mean by that is it seems like there's a lot of investment into companies that are outside of this particular industry. And people who may not, or companies that may not have, you know, their foundation within the controls industry or the building automation industry. And I would say that if you're going to invest in a company, either as an investor or as a customer, that you consider that, having knowledge of the industry is of the utmost importance. That's one thing. And the second thing is that there are people in this industry that want to progress and want to be innovators and want to bring forth disruption and change. So, and most of them, or some of them, are on this call right now. And so not every change, innovation, or disruption is going to come from something from the outside in. And I really don't like, I mean, it helps, it doesn't hurt, but I would really like for people that have been here, like Tracy. I mean, Tracy's been looking at software for a long time and developing his own technology for a very long time. And I know that. I don't know if anybody else knew that, but I know that. I know Anto has been innovating for a really long time. Jim Lee's one of the very first founders of anything analytics and FDD in this industry. I know the same thing, have come up with great solutions and stuff like that. And so people have always been bringing innovative ideas to this industry. It's just not always the people from the outside, nor do we necessarily, need that, although we do welcome it. So that's what I would say.
Combining those two elements, the fact that you need to know this industry and innovation, that's sort of the magic connection, right?
I think it helps. I think it helps, especially for an industry that's really been bogged down to, one way of doing things. I think it does help. I will tell you that, being that I've seen a lot of platforms out there, technology platforms, from people who may not have the knowledge that they should have, it is reflective in that platform. It is very reflective. I see things, I'm like, oh gosh, you think that's great? We've been doing that for 10 years, but they didn't have that knowledge. And so they think it's great. And so they've recreated something or they've missed something, I'm not going to go into that just because I don't want to, but it's just those types of things. I mean, it's you can't just always throw a bunch of software code and think you've solved a problem. It's a little bit more complex than that, in my opinion. That being said, I also don't want to be branded, oh, well, you're not, you're not progressive enough. But no, I have to look out for the customer, right? And I would think if you want to spend your money and your time and everything that's associated with that, you would actually want to work not only with the best solution or technology, but also with the best provider of that technology.
I think what I'm hearing as an undertone there is, you still need that domain knowledge, no matter what you're doing. And the same with this, what in software. I think what you meant when you made that comment was just generic code is no good without the appropriate domain knowledge applied in there, right? And that's the tricky part about outsiders who have attempted to come into the industry and have failed, is they have failed to appreciate the value of that, decades of knowledge in the industry. So that's a really important part. And I'll go back to what I was saying before. And you mentioned, Gina, more than anybody, that kind of middle company. I would argue that even the faces on this screen, as well as I know some of the guests that are listening, they're moving their companies. We're moving our companies towards that side of the spectrum, right? Clearly. So there is activity. It's a little like the frog in the boiling water. You don't notice it when you're sitting in the middle of it. So it is happening, though.
I'd like to add my bit here with the still believe that communication is the key to all of this. And if we look at the history of automated buildings, it has been a place where the innovators can come in with their small companies, start them up. They basically land inside of a domain dominated magazine, and they basically learn back and forth. The typical pattern is they come in, they're doing a few $1 million worth of business. They keep working, they work up to about 30, 40, $50 million, and then they get taken out by one of the big companies. And Gina and I have been playing this game for the last 10 or 20 years. And so that's how I see innovation happening. So again, it's a communication, having a platform where some of this innovation can land and explain itself. You don't necessarily have to agree with it. And I think we have to maybe not be so cruel when some of this new stuff comes in. Let's take apart what they're doing. It's again, like the IoT revolution. They're doing it completely different. They're not wrong. They're just doing it a different way, but they do need to align with the domain. So I think our platform has some value. We've kind of, we're kind of getting old and sleepy here, but we're going to try and dust it off a bit. You gave me the jab about my people, so it becomes obviously that I have to get a people. So we'll be looking at doing something in that direction.
Hey, you better get a people.
That's great. So my one thing, after having spent the last 20, 30 years building what I always describe as integration platforms, I've now come to realize that integration is not really what I'm wanting to do. It's not really the right approach to it. And a lot of the work that I'm doing is now promoting the idea of interoperable systems. So it's really making systems inherently be able to interoperate with each other, much in the same way that BACnet allows a lot of devices to interoperate with each other. That needs to happen at the system level. And that to me is kind of the one big thing, that
Cool.
any and all systems in a building, or in this case, but in any other sort of digital twin space, but any system in a building must be able to talk to any other system in the building if they have a need to do so.
What are some of the higher level applications that you see, Anto, across buildings or across smart cities, or for that integration to apply to? What are the value propositions?
For integration or interoperability?
Interoperability.
Well, I think that's one of the, I get that question asked of me over and over again. And I always sort of think that that's the wrong question, right? It's like, we invented the internet. We didn't really anticipate all of the innovation and all the applications and use cases where the internet's being used. If you were to ask that back in the 80s as to why do you need an IP network that can span the globe, you wouldn't have come up with all of the innovation that exists today, WhatsApp and everything.
But you would have come up with email, which was powerful enough in itself to propel the revolution forward.
Right. So that's, yeah, okay. So that's the killer app. I'm not quite sure what the killer app is for interoperability, but the sort of the notion of everything being able to, if they have a need to interoperate, is kind of the key thing.
It's a lot like what you're talking about, Antos, in the IT space. There are companies like MuleSoft that got sold to Salesforce for $3 billion or whatever it was, or Dell Boomi is another example, or Zapier is the current buzz one.
But none of those do interoperability.
That's true. Yes, they only talk
they do
about
integration
and their channels. Yeah.
Right. So, but they do integration, and the key thing is that, talking about language again, integration is a process. You integrate stuff. Somebody has to do something to make it integrate. So MuleSoft and Boomi provide tools for integration for people to do integration.
Right.
Interoperable systems, on the other hand, don't actually require anybody to stick it together. It's like, I can send an email to anybody in the world. I don't need to be integrated with that person. I'm inherently interoperable with them. That's the big difference between integration and interoperability.
I have two comments on that. One is it's the field of dreams syndrome. If you build it, they will come. When I worked back in the day at Intel, there was always a joke about, why do we need such a fast, powerful processor? Well, because the OS companies are going to build something bigger and stronger and faster that we don't know or don't understand yet, right? And it's the same in what you're talking about here, I think is a big part of it. And then the second comment is interoperability. I love I love that. You know that, right?
Yes, I
And
do.
having been, involved with Lawnmark since its inception, that is a cornerstone phrase that I had to look up old presentations from the early 2000s, and the word interoperability is all over them. I mean, if I just covered up Lawnmark, we could probably reuse half of the language today. And it's the same with the BACnet. I'm sure we could go find old educational slides from BACnet, and that was all over BACnet too. So that's not a new concept, but how do we get it to the point where it means something to people and it has value, right?
That's actually just a quick observation, Tracy. I kind of like that. When you think about it, like heavily involved, I was heavily involved in Lawnmark and BACnet, and would post for either. But in a lot of interesting ways, what we're doing with the stack is we're really moving the discussion further up the line, right? And when we had the whole BACnet Lawnmark discussions, we're doing the right things. We're talking about down at the device and chip and protocols levels. And the thing I see that's changing the equation with the stack is we're moving the whole conversation up. And I think that's significant. No offense to any of us here, when we talked about BACnet a lot, there were a lot of people like, I don't get what you're talking about because it doesn't matter to me per se, and the stack's changing that equation.
I think it's really important, but I think the important thing is when we talk about taking it up to a level, we're talking about taking up to enterprise value propositions.
Yes,
and that's why
exactly.
I mean, that's what makes us relevant with ESG and everything else that we talked about on today's conversation. So it's hard.
Absolutely.
How do we get interoperability up to the business level where people care about it, not in the janitorial closet where they don't?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have 2 minutes to talk about metaverse, and I actually think that interoperation is actually a key part of metaverse, but I don't know. We probably don't have enough time. Maybe we need to talk next week.
Go buy some Oculus, Gina, and try it out first. And go. It's actually kind of cool. If you get one, you'll go climb the Matterhorn and go fly around the Matterhorn. Once you do that, you'll get it pretty fast. So do that. It's only like $300 or $400.
Okay, actually, I think I've got one hanging around somewhere that I've never used. But next time, I would like, though, to hear about what is the impact of the metaverse on what we do.
Maybe we can do a whole show on that.
Yeah,
Sounds interesting.
I know of like only a single real life use case of the metaverse. And that is my daughter-in-law works at GoDaddy. And during the pandemic, they usually have big old blowouts once a year, either Christmas or in the summertime or whatever. They couldn't do that. So they did it in the metaverse. So all of the employees from GoDaddy created avatars and logins, and they went in and they visited with each other all throughout the company, all over the world in the metaverse. And you could go and talk to people from other countries. And so
that should be a goal for us here then, right?
Yeah,
that should be a goal. By the end of this
interesting.
year, we should all do this thing on the metaverse.
And there were all different settings, of course, that they were having these conversations and where people are hanging out. So
Okay.
yeah, that was kind of cool.
So with that, let's bring this to a wrap. It's been an interesting, freewheeling conversation today. So thank you for all, and thanks for everybody in the audience for your chiming in. So video will be up tomorrow morning on YouTube. And with that, wishing you a great week, and we'll talk with you again next Monday. Bye-bye.
Awesome. See you guys.
Cheers.
See you later.